Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So thanks everyone for joining. I'd just like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands that we're all dialing in from today and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Lisa Strover. I'm the chair of the RACI Early Careers Chemist Group in Victoria. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining today on our webinar about mental health. I'd just like to also thank the sponsors of the Careers Development Program, DCS Technical, Envirolab, and Laboratory Credit Union. So we're fortunate enough to be joined today by Kim Grosart, who's a volunteer with the Black Dog Institute. So she's not a psychologist or mental health professional herself, but she'll be talking about her lived experience with mental illness. And while Kim's talk is not specifically about mental health in the workplace, I think in the context of the Careers Development Program, it's a really important conversation to have around mental health, just to raise awareness. So, I mean, we spend so much of our time at work and in study. We can put a lot of pressure on ourselves, work in very stressful environments. So I think it's just quite important to raise awareness and create a culture where we can talk openly about mental health. In my own PhD, I know I struggled a lot, particularly with anxiety and depression. There was a lot of, like, for me, it was really hard to start with looking at my mental illness, not as a weakness, but, you know, as an illness that I needed to get help for and treat, and then working out how to seek out the support I needed, but also to be able to openly discuss what I was going through with my supervisor and with other people in my team, so I could still, you know, look after myself, but also work effectively and, you know, fulfill my responsibilities at work and, yeah, just be there for everyone I was working with as well. So just a quick overview of the structure of today's talk. Kim will, the majority of the talk will be Kim's presentation. She'll introduce herself shortly. And then we'll have a question and answer session at the end. And for that, we'll also be joined by Sam Selwood from Headstrong Workplaces, who is a psychologist who specializes in mental health, in workplace mental health. And I'll just note before I hand over to Kim, this webinar is being recorded. So if you know anyone who might be interested who's not able to join this evening, just mention it to them. Okay, and if you have any questions throughout the talk, please just put them in the Q&A and I will ask them to Kim and Sam on your behalf once we get to the Q&A section. So with that, I'll mute myself and hand over to Kim. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Lisa. And thank you everyone for having me here tonight. I'm just going to share my screen with you now. Presenter mode. Okay. Will I do acknowledgement of country again, Lisa, or I don't need to? Yeah, no? I'll go to the next slide. Okay, so look, hi, I'm Kim and I'm a volunteer lived experience, I'm a volunteer lived experience community presenter for the Black Dog. In the next 40-ish minutes, we're going to talk about the Black Dog Institute, how to recognise signs and symptoms for mental health, and where to seek support for yourself or someone that you care about. I'm going to be sharing some of my personal story with you tonight in the hope that you can connect more easily and better understand mental illness and feel more comfortable talking about it to reduce the associated impact and stigma. So just a little bit about me. I'm 44, I'm happily married, I have a 2-year-old daughter and a small Maltese puppy that makes my family complete. Up until before COVID, I used to own my own medical specialist recruitment company called Health People, and that's where I'd find jobs for dentists, medical specialists and allied health professionals. But with COVID, like many people, it's changed the landscape of my business, and I've just recently taken a job with the Coles Group in the talent acquisition team. In my spare time, I'm a proud Rotarian and I'm the founder of Solar Smiles Dental Charity and Solar Smiles Dental Foundation. And what we do is the Solar Smiles Dental Charity, we take solar-powered backpack dental chairs into rural Timor-Leste, and we look after on a daily basis 2,500 children for all their dental needs. And then the Dental Foundation is actually based here in Melbourne, and we're just about to roll that out next month. And that's actually where we're going to be delivering free dental treatment to the homeless, socially insecure, and food insecure. So the Black Dog Institute, for those of you who aren't aware, the Institute is a research institute and not-for-profit organisation that aims to contribute to a mentally healthier world. And we do this by reducing the incidence of mental illness and suicide, removing stigma, and empowering everyone to lead the most mentally healthy life possible. The Black Dog Institute's model is designed to rapidly translate evidence-based research findings to address mental health issues in the clinic, community, schoolyard, and workplace. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about my story. And my story includes depression, suicidal tendencies, self-harm, and finally my diagnosis of bipolar 2. For me, it began when I was 24. I was working in my own retail business, and I just found out that my first husband had been having an affair. After the big confrontation, I crawled under my office desk into the smallest, darkest space that I could find, and I started to self-harm. You know, up until that moment, I had never felt depressed, and the thought of harming myself had never even crossed my mind. I remember feeling completely numb and disconnected from the world. Looking back, that first incidence of self-harm was like an extreme version of like pinching yourself to find out whether what was happening was real or whether I was actually dreaming. But you know what? I felt absolutely nothing emotionally or physically at the time. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I had these self-deprecating voices that were going round and round in my head, and they were telling me I was worthless, that I was useless, and that I deserved everything that was happening to me. I was hiding under the desk because I was terrified that anyone would see me in that condition because I was completely out of control. My dad found me and he took me straight down to the emergency department, and it was there that it was decided that the episode was situational, and I was given medication and told to go for counselling. After about 6 months and being very compliant, I felt much better. I finished my meds, and you know what? Life went back to being normal. It was, in fact, as if it had actually never happened in the first place. Then, when I was 30 and living in London and exploring the world, it happened again. I had been through my second marriage breakup. So I'm going to tell you, apparently my psychs say people with bipolar can be known for collecting marriages and husbands and ex-husbands. I had recently been fired from my dream job due to the GFC, broken up with a new boyfriend, and realized that all my friends were actually associated with my previous job and that we actually only hung out after work. As you can see, it wasn't just one thing, but a combination of small things that built up and slowly made me feel very alone and isolated. My family was on the other side of the world, and I didn't feel like I had any real friends to be able to talk to about what was going on. I started to only go to work and come straight home afterwards. Weekends consisted of lying on the lounge watching TV with my 2 dogs, never leaving the house, never even going outside. I completely isolated myself from the entire world. I can tell you the exact moment that it went from feeling sad and alone to being suicidal. I was sitting on the top floor of a double-decker London bus coming home from work. The sadness just became overwhelming and the tears started streaming down my face. But you know what? Not one person on that bus even noticed. I felt like no one would notice if I was around or not. They say London never sleeps and you're always surrounded by people, but I'd never felt more alone or more invisible. When I got home, I calmly started putting plans into place for others to come in and take over my life, as I didn't want to leave them a burden. I cleaned my house from top to bottom. It was sparkling. It had never been that clean, and hand on heart, I hope it is never that clean ever again. I paid all my outstanding bills. I wrote a letter to my parents saying goodbye and how much I loved them. And then I rang my second husband that I was now separated from, and gave him all my new PIN numbers and bank account details. I made him promise to come and check on our dogs during the weekend because I was going to be away. He became very worried and stayed on the phone with me for several hours and made me promise to go to the doctor the following day. The conversation calmed me enough to get me through the night, but the ruminating, self-deprecating voices and self-harm had returned. The next morning, as promised, I went to see my local GP and I asked them for help. It was the first of many steps I've taken on this journey, and I'll talk to you a little later in the presentation about how I've turned things around. I do just want to point out, though, that I don't think my age was the significance in the situation. The feeling of isolation can happen at any stage in a person's life, and maybe you or someone you know might be feeling isolated right now. So, to help others or yourself, we need to try and have a better understanding of what mental illness actually is. We need to know that it's okay to reach out for support when we need it, and to have conversations with someone if you're worried about, or know that just being there for someone can really make that difference. But first, why is it important for us to try and better understand mental illness? Knowing about mental illness means we can better help ourselves or those that we care about. My story of experiencing a mental illness isn't a unique one. 1 in 5 Australians experience a mental illness in any given year, and 50% of Australians will experience a mental illness in their lifetime. Mental illness can happen to anyone. Our challenge is that so many people don't reach out for help or support, and they end up doing it really tough on their own. Tragically, people do die from mental illness. Suicide is the leading cause of death for people aged 15 to 44. However, we do believe that suicide is preventable. We know these statistics tell us that mental illness is common and it's serious. We also know that stigma and misunderstanding is getting in the way of people talking about what's going on for them and reaching out for support when they need it. Look, I share my story with you today because for many years I carried around the shame and the guilt of what I'd been through. It was like this monkey sitting on my shoulder, and I was terrified someone was going to find out my dirty little secret. Mental illness, it doesn't discriminate. I live and manage my bipolar. It's part of me, but I tell you, it doesn't define who I am as a person. People living with a mental illness, we don't have a sign on our forehead for you to see. I mean, would you have picked me as someone who has tried to end their life on multiple occasions? Because, I think I present pretty confident and normal, whatever that actually means. The other reason I do this is that my parents cared for me throughout that, and I watched them age far beyond their years due to not knowing that there was support for them in real life or online when they needed it. So depression. It's vital to seek help early to avoid longer term suffering. So how can we intervene early? The first step is learning to recognize the signs and symptoms and know when to seek help when normal moods or sadness turn into something more serious. So let's talk about mood swings. It's important to remember that mild mood swings, they're normal. The fact that we all experience periods when we feel low or down, have a drop in our sense of self-worth, and feel somewhat depressed. Experiences such as having a bad day at work, an argument, or hearing some bad news can impact our mood. In turn, self-esteem can be affected, or confidence may be altered. Perhaps we become a little bit more pessimistic. Sometimes we can even feel sad for no reason at all. But in most cases, most people bounce back. So how do you know if what you or your loved one is experiencing is depression or just normal sadness? 2 key things to check in on regarding depression are your mood. Are you feeling consistently down no matter what's going on for you? And your levels of enjoyment. Are things that you usually enjoy leaving you feeling flat? If they or you are feeling consistently down and losing enjoyment out of the things that normally bring enjoyment, and these feelings have been going on for 2 weeks or longer, then it's a sign for you to reach out and talk to someone about it. Depression can also be associated with feeling less motivated, even for the things that you would normally be motivated by. It can deflate your self-esteem and sense of self-worth, as well as impact your sleep, appetite, energy, and even your concentration or your memory. Depression isn't just feeling sad. It can be feeling nothing at all. And on top of all of this, it's often overwhelming with guilt and hopelessness. In the weeks following my GP appointment in London, I personally experienced rapid weight loss, and that was because I was only eating packets of 2-minute noodles. I slept on the couch in front of the TV instead of going to bed. I took extended leave from my workplace because I found it really difficult to hide my self-harm injuries, and I was feeling really ashamed about people seeing them. And again, I had ongoing self-harm due to not being able to see a solution or a way out of my very dark place. But despite the toughness of depression, it can be managed, and talking about it is the first steps. So let's go through. It's important to be aware of when normal sadness turns into clinical depression. The main symptoms are the ones that you see on the screen. So lowered self-esteem, feeling hopeless, not able to enjoy life, reduced motivation, sleep, appetite, and weight changes, less ability to control emotions such as pessimism, anger, guilt, irritability, and anxiety, varying emotions throughout the day, feeling worse in the morning and better as the day progresses, change sex drive, absence or reduced, poor concentration and memory, lowered energy levels, reduced pain tolerance, and suicidal thoughts. If you are concerned that you may have depression, you can go and try our confidential self-test on the website. The general rule of thumb is 5 or more symptoms persist most of every day for 2 weeks or longer, and these symptoms interfere with your ability to manage at home or work, then it's time to seek help. We would recommend an assessment by a GP or psychiatrist, and I'll talk to you about seeking help later in the presentation. Let's move over to bipolar. Woohoo, this is me. So bipolar is the name used to describe the disorder where your mood can be swinging one extreme to the other. The onset of this disorder is most common in late adolescence. Look, I'd describe bipolar as living on a roller coaster because you experience periods of severe depression followed by high moods, and then it cycles around again. Some features of high moods, look, they're the ones on the screen and they can sound great. But overall, the impacts of unmanaged bipolar are extremely negative on relationships. Hence, I'm now in my lucky third marriage, and your day-to-day life. And of course, highs are always followed by the lows. My highs, just so you can get an understanding. Look, it is everything that you see there on the screen, but then there's this tipping point. So just so you can relate, it would feel a lot like drinking maybe 5 or 6 cans of those energy drinks, all in one go. I become jitty, extremely irritable from the smallest non-significant things. I tend to cause arguments with loved ones and work colleagues. So as an example, I have all my sauce bottles in my cupboard lined up like little soldiers. They have to be from shortest to tallest, and then they also have to be in cuisine, so oils, Asian, barbecue. And my husband knows if I'm in a high mood and to run and duck for cover, if during my highs he puts a sauce bottle back in the wrong line. Look, I also get really anxious if people are working around me too slowly and getting in my way of achieving goals, or they're just not keeping up with me. However, my lows follow quickly afterwards, and I find it difficult to get out of bed. I lack motivation for work. Everything just seems so much harder. However, bipolar is manageable, and with the right support, if you have mood changes that are more severe than normal, last more than a few days, or lead to changes in your behavior, then it's really important that you just talk to someone about it. Anxiety. The most common mental illness experienced in Australia today is anxiety. There's a range of anxiety disorders that you've probably heard of. The most common ones are social phobia, generalized anxiety disorder, and panic disorder. It's normal to feel stressed and worried from time to time, and in small doses, it can actually help us perform at our best. Anxiety tends to be limited in duration and connected with some stressful situation or event, but like busy periods of work. However, how do you know if it's an anxiety disorder? Anxiety becomes a problem when feelings of worry and fear get really strong and don't go away. And these feelings interfere with your ability to carry out your everyday tasks and enjoy your day-to-day life. The fear and worry is combined with physical symptoms, which you can see on the screen. So racing heart, quick breathing, feeling tense, wound up and edgy, and sweating. So for me, when I allow my stress and anxiety to build up, I get this all of a sudden, I get a tightening in my chest. I find it really hard to breathe or even stand up. I get really hot and sweaty, but my hands get really clammy and I can actually hear my heart pounding in my chest. But you know what? Like depression, like bipolar, anxiety disorders, they can be managed. So look, it's important to know that it is okay not to be okay, and there is help and support available for you or a loved one whenever you might need it. With the right support, mental illness can be managed and you can go on to do things that you want to do in life and you can actually enjoy them. If you are experiencing a mental illness on your own, life can feel pretty hopeless at times, but it's important to know that these feelings will pass and it's not going to be like this forever. I get that it can be hard to take those first steps when you're asking and trying to seek support. So for me, I didn't want people to find out and I didn't want them to think any less of me. I battled internally with that guilt and the shame of what I'd gone through and what I was going through. And to be honest, I actually at the time, those years ago, it wasn't as prevalent in society and I just didn't know where to go for help, or who to turn to. However, asking for help and seeking help is the best thing that I've ever done. Look, it might be time to seek help if you notice multiple warning signs of depression, anxiety, especially if they're having a significant impact on your day-to-day life and function. With depression, you should seek help if the symptoms are ongoing for more than 2 weeks. And for anxiety, the warning signs would be occurring more days than not in the past 6 months. Look, it's going to sound cliche, but with support, there is light at the end of the tunnel. My turning point was surrounding myself with a medical team that I trusted and that I clicked with. But look, it didn't happen overnight. And it did take at least 2 different psychiatrists and 3 different psychologists until I felt really comfortable to share how I was feeling and what was actually going on for me. Having a trusted medical team supporting me gave my folks the ability to be able to breathe again, I'm going to be honest. And they actually finally got to sleep again. They finally had a support and someone to turn to in difficult times and moments. Look, the first step is really quite straightforward. It's go and see a doctor. A GP will provide an assessment that will include a general checkup to see whether there are any physical causes to the symptoms and assess the nature of the mental health problem. They might refer you to a psychiatrist or suggest counselling with a psychologist or arrange an appointment with an exercise physiologist where you can all claim a Medicare rebate. Depending on the severity of your depression, some medication may be prescribed to relieve the symptoms. A good tip is to book a long consultation as it can take time to explore all these issues associated with making an accurate diagnosis. It's important to know that for various reasons, the first GP you visit, they might not be the right one for you. You should feel comfortable talking with your doctor how you're feeling and about what's going on for you. You should expect time, confidentiality, and good communication followed with empathy. If you don't click with a practitioner, try another one and keep trying another one until you find the right match. Many workplaces also offer employee assistant programs or EAPs. These programs will allow you to connect with mental health professionals. Guys, there's a variety of treatment options available for people experiencing mental health issues. The correct treatment options are going to vary based on the individual. For most people, it'll be a combination of treatment options that work best. It's worth noting that not everyone has to go on medication, and for many people, medication is a vital part of their treatment. If medication is involved, it's important to find the medication that best fits your symptoms, needs, and biological makeup. And the other point that I like to make is that with medication, it's about working with your trusted health professional. It doesn't have to be a dictatorship. You don't just sit there and take everything that they say. It has to be teamwork between both of you. Good treatment is holistic. While some individuals benefit from medication, it should be given in combination with some kind of talking therapy. And as hard as that can be when you're feeling really down, individuals also have many things that you can do to help yourself start to feel better. And that includes exercise, healthy diet, and doing things that you enjoy. Look, getting to my true diagnosis, it didn't happen overnight, and in fact took 3 to 4 years. Initially, I was diagnosed with severe depression, self-harming, and suicidal tendencies. And this was since the only time I ever presented to a GP was when I was feeling down. I mean, who actually goes to the doctor when you are feeling great and on top of the world? Not many people. I know I didn't. But look, over the years of working with my regular psychologist was how I got to my true diagnosis. Over time, we worked together on my emotional swings, and I found it really helpful to chart them out on a piece of paper with him. But it was more than just charting, I'm high, I'm low. It was about charting what I was actually capable of doing in those moments. So, what I mean by that is, I work as a recruiter, and I'm assuming everyone knows what a recruiter is. You've got an employer, an employee, and I'm kind of the pimp in the middle that brokers the deals. During my lows, I tend to be really, really introverted. I spend time researching companies online. I put together a target sales pipeline, but it's all online. I'm not talking to anybody. Then, as my mood lifts a little bit, I start communicating with the prospective clients. And look, it's going to be via email because I'm just not confident enough to pick up the phone and speak to somebody. But eventually, those people will sit there and say, hey, Kim, I'd really like to meet you in person. And that kind of picks my self-esteem up a little bit. And I go out and I meet them in person. And usually I'm very good at my job and I can talk my way around and I win their business. So that again lifts my mood into the bottom section of my high mood. And then because I've won their business, I'm so excited. That's totally lifted me up. I'm really positive. I run around, I overservice my clients, working 12 plus hours a day to ensure they're getting the best possible service from me, until I hit my wall and I run out of energy. And then I slide way back down into my low period. And then we start all over again. Over time, my psychologist saw this and he kind of pointed it out. He said, look, at times in my cycle, I'm really energetic, I'm focused, I'm driven, I speak really quickly. And he would like me to see a psychiatrist, like what a psychiatrist had to say. So I kind of agreed. And then, of course, I went home and I Dr. Googled myself because, everything's on Google these days. And it's where I first found out about the Black Dog Institute and their self-assessment tool. I completed the quiz and look, lo and behold, it said that I might have bipolar and I should seek further help. I printed out the assessment and I took it to that first appointment with that psychiatrist. He read the results and he asked me to fill out a questionnaire, which was like, I remember it was like 300 questions long. And after that, he analysed it and it was kind of confirmed that I was on the bipolar spectrum. I had elements of borderline personality disorder and elements of obsessive compulsive disorder. So that kind of explains those source bottle examples that I was giving you previously. But look, my psychiatrist, he was amazing when he delivered the news. And I know that's going to sound weird, but he had a website up showing me all the great people in the world with bipolar. There were famous people, there was musicians, sportsmen, business leaders, and world changers. And to be honest, I kind of walked out feeling a bit uplifted and good company, like I've got bipolar. And it was, but it was all in the way that message was delivered to me. And I'm always going to be amazingly grateful to him in how that was done. But you know what? I'm never going to be cured. So staying well is really, really important. I have to have regular appointments with my psychiatrist. And for me, that's about every 6 weeks. And we discuss medication regimes and the outcomes I want to achieve. So with me, weight is a really important thing. Some medications can increase weight significantly. My first one put on about 30 kilos in a very short period of time, which overall didn't work for me long term. So it was about trying to find the right medication to do that, as well as balance that with my mental well-being. The other thing that's really important to me is my strength of emotion and creativity. So some medications can really dull my emotions significantly. So again, it's a balancing act between trying to find that sweet spot between being mentally well and still being able to have my emotions and creativity. I also have regular appointments with my psychologist, and we practice different ways of dealing with emotions and unhelpful thought patterns so that when they occur in my life, I've got tools in my tool belt to be able to deal with them. And then I also touch base with my GP on a really regular basis, and he knows me in the good times, he knows me in the bad times, and he really does know the difference between the two. I also have, I feel a bit bad saying this, but I haven't delivered this presentation since before COVID. So I feel like I'm lying a little bit here, but pre-COVID, I would have 2 sessions per week with my personal trainer, and that was just to get me moving. I must admit, since COVID, I have let that slide. I still do go to the gym, but it's nowhere near as regularly. But it is on my to-do list. After going through my presentation this afternoon, preparing this afternoon, I was kind of like, yep, you've let that slide. You've got to get back into that, Kim. Okay, support online. Look, there are many great resources out there to help you or your loved ones to gather more information about mental health. The Black Dog website includes lots of information to help us all better understand mental illness. There is also information there to assist you with getting help. You can find you can find more than just information online. There's also support available via your phone and the website. You might like to check out My Compass, which is in the corner of the screen there. It's an online interactive self-help program to help you manage mild to moderate stress, anxiety, and depression. I've got an account. It's really, really good. Whether you need help now or want to prepare in the future, My Compass will teach you ways to boost your mental fitness. You can access it there at the website, mycompass.org.au. And then you can go to other places to find more information and support online. Beyond Blue, Reach Out, Men's Line, Lifeline, and Sane Australia. If you or someone you care about is in a crisis situation, there's a couple of great hotlines that you can call. Lifeline provides a 24-hour crisis support and suicide prevention service. Just call 13 11 14. You can go to the Lifeline website to find out more about its services, including the translation and interpretive service, TIS, which you've got on the phone. This is a free interpreting service for people who don't speak English. All you need to do is call that number, 13 11 14, and ask to speak to Lifeline, and then they will organise and call that on your behalf or your friend's behalf. Finally, just helping others. So look, if you're concerned about a loved one, you can make a difference by reaching out and letting them know that you're there for them. For me, that simple conversation saved my life that night in London. Just knowing that someone cared that I existed and was still on the face of the earth was enough to calm me overnight to get me to that GP the next morning. Look, I also remember a really heated discussion at work one day when I was fighting with a really good friend and colleague. She then caught a glimpse of some recent self-harm scars that I had, and look, she immediately stopped arguing with me and she started crying. She just reached out and put her arms around me and told me she loved me. I didn't actually realize what had happened. To be honest, she was completely right in the argument, but as soon as she saw evidence, she completely pulled back and surrounded me with love and zero judgment. She let me win the argument at that moment in time, as she knew there were more underlying issues going on. However, this event hasn't changed our relationship at all, and she now works for me in my current recruitment company. You know what? These days, my friends know if I haven't been in touch in a regular amount of time, for some it's weekly, others it's 2 to 3 months, they pick up the phone, they call and they text me. They say things like, what's going on? I haven't heard from you in 2 months. You've been really quiet. You haven't been on Facebook. They always tend to use timeframes, so I know it's been an unusual length of time and I understand why they might be worried or concerned. You know what? Many don't even beat around the bush or tiptoe around the subject. My mental health isn't a taboo subject in a relationship. And you know what? Why should it be? Normally I ask questions here, but I can't do that. So I was going to say, raise your hand if you've ever asked a friend about coping with their, shoulder injury, diabetes or something else. Because you know what, talking about mental health should be really no different than that. There shouldn't be stigmas or anything attached to it. Through conversations that we've set up with my friends, I know that when they ask me about my mental health, it's from a place of love and concern, not judgment. I know I need to answer them truthfully and put their mind at ease. So we all want to be a good friend to those that we care about, but sometimes it can be tough knowing what to say, what to do, or how to show our support for our friends. The Are You OK Day campaign has some great tips about how to reach out to family and friend member that you might be concerned about. So the first bit is ask, are you okay? Pick a quiet and comfortable environment. Be relaxed and friendly in your approach. Let them know why you're concerned and the behaviours that you've noticed that might be out of character for that person. Help them open up by asking something like, how are you going? I've noticed you've been missing a few lectures lately. If they push back and they don't want to talk, don't criticise them. Just let them be. Let them know that you're there. Let them know the changes that you've seen, and that if they ever need to reach out or call, that you're going to be there for them. If they do reach out to you in that moment, listen without judgment. Take what they say seriously. Don't interrupt and don't rush that conversation. But you know what? You're not there to solve the problem either. You're just there to provide support. You might just be sitting with them. You might just sit there in silence with them. And then encourage action. Ask what they've done in the past to manage similar situations, such as talking to a health professional or accessing information online or support My Compass. Ask them, how do you want me to support you? I must say that my friends do this for me really, really well, and it's something that I really value in our friendships. If it's over 2 weeks, encourage them to seek professional help or access information and support online. And then you know what? Check in. Pop a reminder in your diary to call them, to text them in a couple of weeks, earlier if they're really struggling. Send them something that just says, I've been thinking of you and I wanted to know how you've been going since we last chatted. Stay in touch and be there for them in a genuine, caring way. It really makes such a difference. I had some great friends reach out to me during the COVID lockdown period and it made me feel so loved and so special. You know what? Conversations, they're not easy, but no matter the response you get, letting someone know that you care about them, you know what, it's always the right thing to do. And you're probably never going to have the right words, but that person on the other end knows that they're cared about. So let's talk about staying well. These days I manage my mental health to help stay well by, look, this is talking pre-COVID for me. I changed my work situation, so I worked from home for the last 7 years. And it's a means that I can work at a pace that I'm comfortable with on that day. So 12 to 16 hours during my home high moments, but also spending a couple of days on the couch watching Netflix if I'm in the depressed area. At Coles, I'm going to be honest, it's still a work in process. I haven't quite worked out how it's going to work or what's going to happen. It's still very new. It's only about 10 weeks in, but I'm getting there. It's a work in progress. I'm also really open with my clients and they're able to see and acknowledge my achievements, but they're very understanding when I just need time for myself as well. I've learned to be more open with my partnership with my husband. I take on board when he can see my mood swings coming, and I try to increase my self-care during that time. I've learned not to push my family and friends away anymore. I'm upfront and I'm honest about all aspects of my life. And you know what? At times for them, it can be really, really hard hearing about what's going on, especially if I'm near self-harming. But you know what? My real friends stick around and they support me through the ups and downs because they'd rather know when I'm at that point than have me hiding things from them. Through Solar Smiles Dental Charity and Rotary, I'm able to help others who are less fortunate than me. It keeps me grounded and focused on a better future. It gives me reasons to appreciate elements of my life and a feeling of being grateful. So back to where we started. I now continue to try, understand my mental illness, which I'm going to tell you, it's ongoing and it's ever changing. For me, with my new work, I've become a parent in the last couple of years. I seek support whenever I'm having a tough time. I keep open about my mental health and have conversations with my mates. You know what? It is such an open conversation with me. They all ring me and go, Kim, how's your head? It's as simple as that. It's as open as that. And you know what? I share my story with people just like you to help break the stigma, raise awareness, and help you challenge any stereotypes that you might have about people that are living with mental health. That's pretty much it, guys. Look, while my road to now, it hasn't been an easy one. It has taught me a lot. I've gained the ability to just listen without trying to fix things. I'm less judgmental and I have far more empathy. I let people know that they can talk to me about anything, as I've seen the bottom of the deepest, darkest, blackest hole, and nothing that they can say to me is ever going to make me think any less of them. I hope that through sharing my story in this presentation, you've learned a bit more about mental health. My takeaway hopes for this are that you seek support if you're concerned about your own mental health, or you start a conversation with a loved one that you might be worried about. If you want to keep in touch with the Black Dog Institute news, you can like us on Facebook or subscribe to our e-news through our website. Thanks for having me here today. I'm more than happy to take any questions, but just keep in mind that I'm not a trained health professional and I'm only going to talk to you from my own lived experience. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kim. Yeah, I'm sure I speak on behalf of everyone, all the participants, when I say we really appreciate your time and also just your openness with us. So before we go to the Q&A, I will quickly introduce our other panelist, Sam Selwood. Sam is a psychologist who, as I mentioned at the start, specialises in workplace mental health. She's previously worked in the psychological health unit at Workplace Health and Safety Queensland, helping employers to understand their obligations in relation to psychological health and safety, and has worked for a number of years in the Queensland Police, supporting employee wellbeing. She currently runs her own business, providing coaching, training, and consultancy services that support mentally healthy workplaces. So if anyone has any questions for either Sam or Kim or both, please ask them in the question and answer function. We have a couple of questions coming through. Just one that's come through in the chat quickly that Kim may be able to answer. Just quickly, is Lifeline only for crisis? What about people who are having problems but aren't severe or self-harming?
Look, I can only talk from my own personal experience, but COVID really hit me badly. It decimated my business. I'm going to be honest. One day I had a business and the next day it was gone. And I didn't know where to reach out for help. And I did. I rang Lifeline and they sat with me on the phone for probably, because I was crying. I wasn't at the self-harming stage, but I had those thoughts. They were fantastic. Those counsellors on the phone, they're so empathetic. They've got the right words at the right time. It was enough to calm me down. And again, it was enough to get me to take action and go and see my GP. You know, I would very highly advocate for reaching out if you need them. They're great. It's not just a suicidal line. It's, I'm feeling terrible. I don't know what to do. I can't get out of bed. There's someone to talk to when there's no one else you feel like you can talk to. And I must admit, one of the times, I've called them several times, and one of the times I was like, okay, I'm done with this conversation. Thanks so much. I'm feeling better. And they were like, no, can we have your name and can we have your number? And, you know, would you mind if we reach back out to you? And I was like, no, I'm fine. But you know what? I did give them my name and number, and hand on heart, they called me the following day and they checked in, and it was just it was really lovely. Cared about.
Can I also jump in there and just mention, I don't know whether you've come across this one, Kim, but Beyond Blue has something called the New Access Program. So it is actually a free counselling program, and it is actually specifically for people who aren't necessarily in crisis or, you know, experiencing mental illness, but are just struggling. New Access, unfortunately, I don't think it's available everywhere, but it is a free program, and you can have a number of appointments with trained counsellors. So that's also another good alternative it isn't crisis focused, and you can have that kind of ongoing relationship with a counsellor.
And also your mental health plan through your GP.
Yeah.
They subsidise psychology appointments. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, so another question that's come through, which both of you might be able to answer. How do you overcome the hesitations involved in seeking help and in the workplace? So this might be one particularly for Sam, but I think it's also something that Kim would have dealt with. Is there risk in harming you? Sorry?
I said I've probably been that person.
Me too. Is there risk in harming your professional image with issues like privacy or having go on your long-term record if you bring up mental health, taking time off work, things like that? So I don't know if either of you particularly want to jump in and answer first.
I'm happy to jump in, but I'll be interested in Kim's perspective. You can probably talk about it from both sides, as a recruiter and as a person who's had those experiences as well. But I will say, I know that is actually a tricky one, because whilst we're continuing to really work hard and you know, Black Dog Institute and lots of other places are really focusing on trying to reduce stigma, there are some, you know, there's still work to be done. And so I can certainly understand sometimes why people really hesitate and maybe have some concerns around trust and whether it's okay to disclose in the workplace. I think that has to be a very individual decision, and people have to do what's right for them and what helps them to feel safe. One of the things that I'm a big fan of, and Kim touched on this a little in the presentation, for that reason, is that there is so many online programs that can be just a little bit of a stepping stone, particularly if people have hesitation for whatever reason about going and seeing somebody and having that conversation face to face. Now, those online therapy programs aren't for everybody, but there's really good research around actually just how effective they can be. So for some people who have some of those hesitations, I often would suggest pointing them in the direction of some of those really good quality online programs. In some cases, it can be completely self-paced. Sometimes you can have therapist input online, but some of them can be completely anonymous as well. So that means that it's a way to kind of dip a toe in the water if you have got worries around your confidentiality.
Yeah. So look, I'm in a very bizarre, unique situation, I'm going to be honest. There is still a lot of old school companies and particularly industries that don't do well with the mental health stuff. For instance, my husband is a lawyer and I'm a mental health advocate. You know, I do this, it's all over my business website. It is all over, like my suicide story. I've got a podcast that I have done for the Black Dog and I put it on my LinkedIn profile. And I thought he'd be proud, but his boss's wife is connected to me on LinkedIn, which I must have done ages ago because of the dental charity. She listened to my whole podcast and he nearly died. He nearly died because he's in a professional law firm and he's a partner there. And he was like, what are you doing? Now my bosses all know. So, you know, there still is stigma and based around it. But on the flip side of that, I am desperately now trying to get a full-time job with Coles because from the moment I put one toe in the water with Coles, their mental health advocacy and what they do for their staff is phenomenal, like nothing I've ever seen before. There's actually a group starting up where they're talking, saying, Kim, if you get a job here, please come and be part of this mental advocacy group because they do disability and LGBTQI. It's all kind of making sure there's diversity and inclusion in every element of the business. So there are some businesses that are going above and beyond because Coles look at some of these other corporates overseas and goes, you know what, we're nowhere near as good as what IBM is, or we're nowhere near as what Google is. So it's coming around, but unfortunately, until you have more people that can speak out like me, and, you know, I nearly died on my Coles CV. It says I have bipolar on the second or third line of my CV now because there's no hiding from it. It's on my LinkedIn, it's on my Facebook pages for my charity. It's everywhere. So I couldn't hide from it. So I'm like, I'm just going to put it front and forward. And I nearly died because nobody blinked an eyelid. Not one person in the recruitment team, not my new manager. No, they went, oh, okay. Does it affect your work? No. So it is hit and miss. But I must admit, whenever I take a job, regardless of whether it's hit and miss, up until this Coles job, I used to work really hard, perform really hard, achieve everything that someone asked of me. And then just in casual conversation, I'd just drop in, oh, yeah, that might be because of my OCD and bipolar. And then people would go, oh, you have? But by then they've already got this different version of who I am. So it's kind of just part of me, but it doesn't describe me, if that makes sense. Like it's not the first thing they think about me. They think about the work and the targets and what I've achieved and then go, oh, she has bipolar. And I had a recruitment manager to that degree that when it was all happening and I was getting my diagnosis and stuff, and I was achieving beyond every other recruiter in the office. And then we had another recruiter who came in with borderline personality disorder, and he sat us down as a team one day and he goes, that's it, guys. Our next recruitment is only going to be someone with mental health, borderline personality, bipolar, because you guys smash all the targets by far. So that has changed someone's perception, you know, so it is changing. It's slow though. It's so much better than it was 12 years ago, but it's still there. It's still slow.
Thank you. I might just ask a question related to that. So the people here are quite early in their careers, but if they find themselves in a work environment which, you know, doesn't give them that kind of support where they're not comfortable discussing their mental health. As someone who's kind of junior, you know, in the company, or, you know, a research student who's quite, you know, early in their career, is there anything they can do to promote an environment that there's more, that, you know, fosters more open discussion about mental health in the workplace? Or is that something that kind of needs to come from the top more?
Sam, do you want that one?
Yeah, sure. Look, I actually think that's a really tricky one, because I think when you're early in your career, you know, without a doubt, you know, there's you're still trying to find your way. You're still trying to get the lay of the land, and figure out how things work. I actually think that, you know, when we like often when I'm, talking to folks about mental health, and it's really common, we talk about the idea of a mental health spectrum, and you might have, you know, good mental health on one end, and right at the other end, you might have that point where there's really quite significant impacts on somebody's functioning, and maybe they've been, you know, have a diagnosis of a mental illness. But in the middle there, we would have that kind of area around, I guess, you know, mental health problems, for want of a better word. And you know, often what I say to folks is, every single one of us at one time in our life, if not in fact many times of our life, will wander down that pathway to that bit in the middle where we're struggling, where it's a bit more of a strain, and that's and most of us most of the time, you know, bounce back up. Some of us some of the time continue on, you know, down to that end where we might be, you know, more impacted in terms of our functioning. But I just think actually part of that conversation is just actually not, you know, acknowledging we all struggle sometimes. That's just being a human being, you know, that's just how the world works. So I think sometimes it's perhaps just actually just normalizing that bit in the middle, the struggles in the middle, and being open about the fact that we're having a rough time, we're really struggling, we're feeling a little bit of the strain, and that doesn't mean anything other than the fact that you're a normal human being, and you're doing the best that you can to cope with life's ups and downs. I think when we kind of are in those environments where we feel like we have to put on this game face and pretend we're awesome all the time, I think that's that's when it can be a real struggle, and that's not what's realistic. So just the fact that we're just acknowledging that we're not all awesome all the time, I think is the start of that conversation.
I think as a junior person as well, you know, getting involved with the charity side of things, you know, like the Are You OK Day campaign and awareness campaigns, that at least brings it into your business. You know, maybe going and doing a fun run on behalf of the Black Dog or Beyond Blue or something that brings that awareness and focus back into the business on mental health. So I think the more times during a year that a company, you can, I mean, even if you're the instigator, you go, hey, I'm going to do a fun run, or I'm going to do 10,000 steps, or I'm going to do the squat challenge, I'm going to do the blah, 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 blah on behalf of this. And the more that happens, it normalizes people talking about it. It brings it out of the shadows and back into normal life, I guess. But no, as a young person starting a career, it's incredibly intimidating. It's incredibly difficult. And I am a completely different person today in the way that I deal with this and speak to you and deal with my boss, as in like the third line on my CV, compared to when this happened 12 years ago. And I still had very bright red self-harm scars on me that were visible to other people. I was so ashamed by that. It was this monkey that sat on my shoulders, and it took years of forgiveness, self-forgiveness, to be able to get out of that. But I also can tell you that the first time I opened my mouth and I said to somebody, wow, I've struggled and I've been suicidal, I've tried to take my own life, people didn't react the way that I thought they were. I thought that they were going to be mean and rude and how could you, and oh, that's disgusting. And they're not. Most people, and I'm not saying all, but most people are incredibly empathetic. Everybody just wants to lean over and give me a hug and just go, oh, darling, we love you. And, you know, don't be stupid. We need you on this planet. And, you know, you're incredible and blah, blah, blah. So you know, it's a bit that as well. I think opening up to friends and family first in a genuine way and letting them know what's happening is probably the easiest way. And then once you have that confidence to be able to speak about it to people that know and love you, then that confidence comes to be able to talk about it in a working environment.
Thank you. So we're running very short on time. I would like to ask a couple of quick questions that have come through in the Q&A. So just a quick one for Sam. Can you suggest in particular any anonymous programs for people who might want to seek help?
Yeah, I'm actually wondering, you know, I have like a little fact sheet where I list a whole lot of online programs because I am a real fan of them, and it actually identifies I've got a little tick box as well, and it identifies whether you can register anonymously, whether there's, you know, a paid option or whether it's free, you know, and those sorts of things. So it's actually a bit of a list. Is there a way that could be attached to the webinar recording or something like that, Lisa?
Absolutely, yeah. Dave has just put in the chat. If you send that through to either myself or Dave, then we can send that out to the participants.
Absolutely.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah, then that's what I'll do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know this is one that we could probably talk about a lot, but maybe if you could each just say a couple of quick sentences and then we'll wrap up. So if you have a friend or a colleague who is suffering, first of all, how might you comfort them in the first place? I think just to calm them down, get them to maybe a calmer place. But then also, what can colleagues and friends do to be of support to someone who's clearly suffering, particularly in a situation where they might be reluctant to seek help? So I might start with Sam and then hand over to Kim.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I guess, so the second question, because I think I've already forgotten the first one, Lisa, sorry about that. The second question, really about how can you support somebody who might be reluctant to get help. That is an incredibly tricky one, and I've certainly supported with people who, you know, who are worried about somebody in their life, and trying to navigate that, and it can be incredibly tricky. On the one side of things, I think that there is a case to be made for respecting a person's right to manage something as best as they can. And you know what, sometimes for some people that means it's like, you know what, I'm just barely holding on by my fingernails. I actually can't take the lid off this right now, so I actually don't want to have those conversations right now, and respecting their right to be able to do that. I think the trick though is knowing when it's getting to a point where actually that you're more concerned about that person's well-being, and about their ability to make some of those decisions. And then it's about being able to, I think, come from very much from a place of care and say, I'm really worried about you and I think we need to get some help. So let's talk about what that's going to look like. You know, and then the person says, no, I don't want it. Just by being, again, really clear, but really caring and compassionate, and saying, I know you're really worried about this, but I'm really worried about you, and I just don't think we can continue doing nothing. So let's talk about who we're gonna bring in for some extra help. What are your thoughts, Kim?
I'm going to say slightly different. If someone's in crisis, and I mean crisis, I mean like suicidal, self-harming, you pack them in a car. I don't care who they are to you. You pack them in a car. They're a friend, they're a work colleague, because I saw here the nuance between the two. You pack them in a car, you take them to the emergency centre where there's specialists that can help them, because that can't be on you guys. It really can't. If they're at that stage, you've got to get them to help. Ambulance it, get them to the hospital. If when my friends reach out and I'm not ready to talk, there are a couple things. Send them a text message. If I don't want to talk to someone, they'll send me text messages. And you know what? Even when I don't answer, they send me another one a couple of days later going, I know you can't answer. I know you're in a place where you just can't answer, but no, I love you. No, I'm here. And it's just when you're on the other end and you can't physically, I get to the stage where I can't answer text messages. And this was through COVID. Definitely couldn't take a phone call. just knowing that that person cares and knows that they want me on the planet is really more powerful than I can even tell you. I had friends doing that during COVID all the time because they were a bit worried about me and the business and all that kind of stuff. And again, the nuance between friend and colleague, I tell you, that line becomes extremely blurry when you're in a place where you're struggling and someone reaches out to you. All of a sudden they're your friend. I'm telling you that. You become that person's friend because they are reaching out for any kind of contact to feel like a meaningful part of the planet. So don't think that just because I'm a colleague, I shouldn't write that text message or I shouldn't reach out to tell someone I care about them. Don't worry about it, because all they can do is not answer you or say no, right? And you've lost nothing. But that person you could have given the most incredible message to, and I say that from the bottom of my heart, because I've had colleagues do that to me, people that I never expected to reach out to me and help me really have, in a really meaningful way. So please don't let the nuance of that stop you from reaching out.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kim and Sam. That was fantastic. No, thank you. So unfortunately, we have to wrap up there. Obviously, there's so much that we could discuss about this. Thanks to both of you. Thanks to the Careers Development Program for giving us this forum for this discussion. Of course, the sponsors. So just a couple of quick things to wrap up. Obviously, some of the stuff we've discussed has been pretty heavy. And if anything that we've discussed has been triggering for anyone in the audience, we really encourage you to access some of the resources we've discussed. I've put a few quick links down the bottom there. We'll also send out, we've got the recording if anyone wants it, and also those resources that Sam spoke about. I think, yeah, so one final announcement on a lighter note. Next Thursday evening at 6:30, the Careers Development Program event is Camaraderie, which I think most of you may have been, but it's a networking event. Yeah, quite a nice place to chat, network. Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining. And yeah, thanks again to our speakers.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
No, thank you.